They laughed at me behind my back. But the joke was built on the very foundation I gave them. I swear she still thinks entrepreneur starts with an I, my oldest said at Thanksgiving while sipping wine I couldn't pronounce and scrolling her phone like I wasn't even there. They all chuckled. My own children. I was sitting in the same kitchen I once taught them the alphabet in, with letters taped to the fridge, sticky from syrup and survival. And I just froze. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because it hit me I had been raising strangers. Strangers with my blood, my sacrifices, my stories, but no memory of who made them. They forgot that I never learned to read properly because I was too busy keeping us alive. At 15 I was cleaning houses while other girls were going to prom. At 16 I was working night shifts at a truck stop diner trying to afford diapers. And by 21 I had 3 kids and no husband, no diploma, no help. Just grit and hope duct taped together. But I made it work. I taught myself to read one word at a time. Cookbooks. Bus signs. Church bulletins. I'd sound out bedtime stories for them, stumbling over syllables but never skipping a page. They didn't care then. They just wanted mom to hold them to read The Cat in the Hat, with voices and faces and magic. No. Now they were embarrassed by me. They corrected my grammar mid-sentence. They rolled their eyes when I mispronounced something. They whispered about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Mom's sweet, my son once told his girlfriend, but she's kind of uneducated. Uneducated? Oh baby. I was under-resourced. There's a difference. And when they said I was illiterate, that word hit me like a brick to the chest. Not because it was true, but because they said it like it was funny. As if the woman who sat in the ER all night when they broke a bone, the woman who taught them to tie their shoes, write their names, sound out their first words, was now just someone to mock at the dinner table. I went home that night and sat in my old car with the heat broken and the radio stuck on AM. I cried. Not because I was weak, but because I was done. Done being quiet. Done being humble. Done letting the people I built talk down to me like I was a floor they walked on. That night I made a decision. I didn't need to be accepted. I didn't need to be praised. I didn't even need to be invited. I just needed to rebuild without asking for permission. They forgot who taught them to read. Now it's time they read the story of the woman they underestimated. And I'm the one holding the pen. It's a strange kind of grief. The one that comes from still being alive but realizing your children have already written your obituary. They didn't kill me with fists. They did it with silence. With side eyes. With "we'll call you later," and invitations that never came. They phased me out of their lives like I was a glitch in their perfect little image. Like I wasn't refined enough for the wine tastings. Not worldly enough for the destination weddings. Not educated enough to sit at the table I built for them with my own blistered hands. I spent years trying to keep up. I took community classes at night after long shifts at the diner. I bought flashcards and dictionaries, practicing words I never had time to learn when I was raising them. I watched YouTube videos on grammar, on posture, on pronunciation. I wanted them to be proud. But pride was a currency I never had enough of. Then came the breaking point. It was my granddaughter's birthday. She was turning 6, the same age my daughter was when I taught her to read Goodnight Moon, with a flashlight under the blanket. I showed up with a handmade quilt. Took me 3 months to finish. Her name stitched in pink across the front, every corner sewn with stories and lullabies. But when I knocked on the door no one answered. I waited outside for 15 minutes before my son-in-law came out and said, "Oh, yeah. Sorry, we're keeping it small. Just close family." Close family. I was standing right there holding a gift made of time, love, and memory, and still I was invisible. That night I drove home, quilt still folded on the passenger seat, heart crumpled beside it. I didn't cry this time. I just stood in my tiny kitchen, looked at myself in the cracked mirror above the sink and said out loud, "You are not disposable." I needed to hear it from me, because no one else was saying it. And I was done chasing their acceptance like it was oxygen. So I stopped. I stopped calling. Stopped waiting for invites. Stopped sending money when they were a little tight this month. And I started living like I mattered. I signed up for adult literacy tutoring at the local library, not just as a student but as a volunteer too. I'd come full circle. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had raised a family and forgotten herself in the process. Every Tuesday I sat with women like me. Women who worked double shifts, who packed school lunches with IOUs and hope, who got mocked by their own flesh and blood. We helped each other. We read out loud. We practiced writing resumes. We shared our stories. And slowly I stopped feeling like a ghost. I got a part-time job at the library. Then a full-time offer to coordinate the adult education program. Me. The woman they once called illiterate. One night after a class I opened the storage closet and found an old typewriter. It was beat up, dusty, missing keys. Just like me. But I brought it home anyway. Put it on the kitchen table. And every evening I wrote a page. About survival. About sacrifice. About how love can become a leash if you let it. The kind of story my children refused to read. But the world would. Because I wasn't erasing myself anymore. I was writing myself back in, louder, prouder, unashamed. They tried to erase me. So I started over without them. And I was just getting started. They didn't call when I stopped showing up. Didn't ask if I was okay when my birthday passed without a word from me. But the moment my name hit the local news, suddenly my phone was blowing up like I'd come back from the dead. Funny how silence turns to curiosity when the world starts clapping for the one they cast aside. It happened after my literacy group was featured on the evening news. They called us the late bloomers. A circle of women over 50 reclaiming their voices through reading, writing, and relentless resilience. There I was, front and center in my Sunday best, holding that old typewriter like it was a trophy. I taught my children how to read, I told the reporter, tears in my throat. But I had to teach myself how to matter. That line went viral. Overnight, our group's enrollment tripled. Donations poured in. A retired publisher from Atlanta reached out and said, "Your story needs to be told." He offered to help me self-publish my memoir. I said yes. And just like that, the woman they once dismissed as uneducated, embarrassing, too simple to understand the world, became the woman they watched the world celebrate. My son was the first to reach out. "Hey ma, saw you on the news." "That's wild," he texted like we'd just bumped into each other at the grocery store. No apology. No accountability. Just shock that I had a life he didn't script. Then came my oldest daughter. "Mom, I didn't know you'd been doing all this. Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at that message for a long time before I responded. "You never asked." It wasn't said in anger. It was just the truth. They had built their lives on the assumption that I'd always stay small so they could feel big. But I was no longer that woman. I was booking library talks, signing books in coffee shops, receiving letters from strangers who saw themselves in my pages. One woman wrote, "You gave me permission to stop apologizing for existing." I cried reading that. Because for so long I thought existing quietly was all I was allowed to do. Now I was existing boldly. And it terrified them. At Thanksgiving that year I was invited, but not begged, to come. I thought about it. I thought long and hard. Then I stayed home. I made my own dinner. Just me, some baked chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, and a glass of wine. At 6:30 p.m. I did a live stream for our literacy group. Shared stories, recipes, laughter. The comments rolled in like confetti. "You're the grandma I wish I had. Your strength gives me hope. I showed your interview to my teenage daughter. I had a family. A real one. Not bound by blood but by belief. By bravery. By becoming." And somewhere in a cozy suburban home, my children were probably asking each other, "How did she do it?" But the truth was simple. They buried me under shame. And I grew roots. They forgot I was the soil that raised them. Now I was blooming in full view. And they couldn't believe it. The invitation came in a crisp ivory envelope with gold lettering. Annual Patterson Family Reunion. Dress code, formal. Venue, the Willow Grove Country Club. First I thought it was a joke. I hadn't heard from my siblings in nearly 5 years. Not since the night they humiliated me at Grandma's funeral for mispronouncing eulogy. The night they laughed, sneered, and whispered, "What's she even doing here? She's not one of us." But here it was, an invitation. With my full name spelled correctly. I stared at it for a long time. And for a split second the old version of me whispered, "Don't go. You'll embarrass yourself." But that voice. She's dead now. So I circled the date, picked out a dress that hugged my new confidence, and RSVP'd yes. +1. My +1. My story. My transformation. My undeniable glow-up. I walked into the country club with my head held high, my locks twisted in a regal updo, wearing a royal blue dress that shimmered like power under the chandelier lights. At my side, a young woman named Arya, one of my top literacy students who'd just earned a full scholarship to UCLA. I didn't come alone. I came with legacy. When my cousin Darnell saw me, his jaw literally dropped. He stuttered, Gloria? Is that really you? I smiled. Last I checked. My sister, Paulette, the ringleader of my humiliation years ago, stood near the punch table. She blinked like she'd seen a ghost. You look different, she said slowly. I am. The family reunion hadn't changed. Same music. Same buffet line. Same whispers. But I had changed. I wasn't just someone's aunt or sister or cousin anymore. I was Dr. Gloria Patterson, founder of Words of Worth, the adult literacy nonprofit that had just secured a state grant and been featured on local news. I didn't come to rub it in. I came because I was done shrinking. But then Paulette leaned in with a smirk and said, "Still can't pronounce champagne right, can you?" I looked at her. No anger. No embarrassment. Just grace. Maybe not. But I can write a grant proposal that feeds 300 families. Can you? That shut her up. Later that evening, when the DJ asked for volunteers to speak, I took the mic. Not to brag, but to honor. I want to thank my mother, I said. Because even though we grew up in a house with cracked walls and empty cupboards, she taught me that knowledge was something no one could take from you. And even when I struggled with reading, I knew how to feel words. And eventually I learned how to use them. Now I teach others. Applause echoed across the room. Arya beamed at me with teary eyes. Paulette didn't clap. She couldn't. Because now everyone was looking at me, not her. After the event, a few cousins asked me for help enrolling in our literacy programs. One even asked if her son could intern with me. Suddenly, the woman they once laughed at had become a pillar. A lighthouse. A bridge. And guess what? The girl who couldn't read a full sentence at 14 now had her name on a city proclamation day. How's that for punctuation? It started with a phone call from a soft-spoken young reporter named Vanessa Green. She said she'd been following my nonprofit's work through our social media page and local events. We're doing a series on women changing their communities, she explained, and when your name came up I had to know more. Would you be willing to share your story on air? I nearly dropped the phone. Me. The same woman who used to avoid PTA meetings because she was afraid someone would ask her to read out loud? But then I thought of all the people like me. Mothers, grandmothers, former dropouts, who lived in silence because of shame. Who felt like their voices didn't matter. I said yes. When the camera crew pulled up to our learning center, a refurbished church basement that now smelled like hope and coffee, I had already swept the floor 3 times. My palms were sweaty but my heart was steady. Vanessa asked gentle questions. I told the truth. I told her about growing up in a house where books were luxury items and survival was the daily curriculum. About how my kids used to laugh at me for confusing letters. About the day I finally enrolled in a GED prep class at age 42, heart pounding like I was walking into a courtroom. I told her about the nights I cried in the bathroom, ashamed that I couldn't help my youngest son with his homework. And I told her how I promised myself I'd never let another woman feel that kind of alone if I could help it. Vanessa's eyes shimmered. When the story aired, it wasn't just a segment. It was a spotlight. A declaration. A resurrection. They called the piece. From silence to strength. The woman who taught herself, then the world. That same evening my phone blew up. Strangers. Former classmates. Even some of my old teachers. Everyone wanted to donate, volunteer, or just say thank you. But the one text that stopped me cold came from Paulette. I saw the segment. You looked powerful. I didn't realize how much you'd been through. I'm sorry for laughing back then. Truly. I didn't respond right away. Not out of spite, but because I wasn't that same desperate girl begging to be accepted by people who couldn't see past her flaws. The next morning, one of my students, an 18-year-old single mother named Jasmine, walked into class and held up a worn library card like it was a diamond ring. "I got it after I saw you on TV," she grinned. "I figured if you could do all that, maybe I can too." That was it. That was everything. My success wasn't the spotlight. It was the spark. And the same people who once turned away from me now had to watch me ignite something much bigger than just revenge. It was a movement. After the news story aired, my name started echoing in circles that used to shut me out. I was invited to speak at the local women's shelter. Then the public library asked me to run a literacy week for adults. Churches, schools, even universities wanted to hear from the woman who beat the odds. And then came the email that changed everything. It was from a small publishing company out of Atlanta. "Your journey is deeply moving. We believe it could change lives. Would you consider writing a memoir?" I sat there staring at the screen for nearly an hour, blinking back tears. Me, the girl who couldn't spell encourage at age 16, was being asked to write a book. I called it, Between the Lines, My Journey from Shame to Strength. I didn't spare details. I told the whole truth. Not the polished version my family would have preferred, the real one. I wrote about my children mocking my handwriting. About how my sisters whispered that I was too dumb to keep up. About that day Paulette told everyone at the family barbecue that I'd probably die cleaning houses because she ain't got the brain for nothing else. I put it all in there. Every bruise. Every betrayal. When I sent the final manuscript to my editor, my hands were shaking. But not from fear, this time it was power. The book launched 6 months later. And that's when my family came crawling. Not all at once. First it was my cousin Carla tagging me in a Facebook post. So proud of my cousin and her new book. Always knew she'd be something special. I laughed out loud. She hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. Then came the text. From Paulette. From my niece who once called me country dumb. From my oldest son who hadn't visited since Christmas 3 years ago. "We should reconnect. Family is all we've got. Let's put the past behind us." But here's what they didn't realize. I didn't write that book for revenge. I wrote it for release. I wrote it to let go of the weight they handed me. To give voice to the little girl inside me who spent decades pretending she wasn't hurting. And now that it was out there, printed, bound, reviewed in the Atlanta Times, they couldn't change the story. They couldn't silence me anymore. They couldn't dismiss what they did. Because it was there, in ink. One Sunday afternoon I was asked to speak at a reading conference in Birmingham. As I stepped onto that stage staring out at a sea of women, young, old, tired, determined, I felt something I'd never felt before. Peace. Not because they believed me now, but because I finally believed in myself. My children came around eventually. My daughter bought 5 copies of my book. My son came to one of my signings and asked me to autograph his. They smiled like they'd been part of it all along. I smiled back. Because the truth was they had been part of it. Just not in the way they thought. They were the ones who underestimated me, dismissed me, mocked me, and every single one of those wounds became a page in my story. They didn't break me. They built the fire I needed to rise. Now when people come into my literacy center and say, "I don't know if I can," I hand them my book, look them in the eye and say, "You already have. You're here." That's how I started too. You see, I may have been called illiterate once, but now I'm the author of my own destiny. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these stories alive, and we drop new episodes every single day.